Everything just works. Everything just works.
Everything just works.
I was being sarcastic.
A Swiss Army knife which hopefully has a Phillips head screwdriver in it, hopefully has a Phillips head screwdriver in it, and hopefully has a Phillips head screwdriver in it.
I bled for this fucking thing.
This video is brought to you by us and the Disappointment PC t-shirt. A great way to support Gamers Nexus and to commemorate a year of despair is to wear a constant reminder of your disappointment. The GN Disappointment t-shirt features release dates for major milestones like Spector and Meltdown, the CTS Labs report, and RAM prices, accompanied by an artifacted design that matches the infamous XD failure mode on new video cards. The shirts are high-quality fabrics and prints and are available in soft 100% cotton for a comfortable fit or available in a popular tri-blend. Visit store.gamersnexus.net or click the link below to grab one now, starting at $19.99. It's not just the worst parts of the year anymore. You may have seen our Disappointment PC build last year. The 2017, that was the first one, and now it's going to be a regular thing because part of the stuff we deal with on a daily basis is, in fact, disappointing, and that's okay. There's a lot of really positive stuff from this year, too, and we've talked about that, for example, in our best cases 2018, best CPUs 2018, stuff like that. There's plenty of good stuff, but it's also fun to reflect on just some of the most either out there or just totally bad products and events of the year, and look back on it now that we're at the end of 2018 and see what we might have in store for 2019, get some perspective. As for the script for this one, I barely need a script because as you saw on our new shirt in the ad, which is on the store, on store.gamersnexus.net if you want to pick it up, we have a timeline, almost in concert tour style, of all of the most disappointing aspects of 2018 in the computer hardware world. And so, I mean, some of those here, Spector and Meltdown, that was a pretty big one. Cryptocurrency mining was big. Final Fantasy 15's benchmarks were big. All of that stuff, but the most important thing here is the PC that you saw in the intro. This PC is a collection of the most downer moments that we could muster into a single build. This is our actual disappointment build, or, well, it was, but we had to send the case back because it was that disappointing. But we still tested the build as is. The most disappointing parts of the year are all in this system. There are some unfortunate casualties, like Corsair. Corsair didn't do anything wrong here, but we did have to use a cooler of some kind, and we didn't have any particularly upsetting 2018 coolers, and we didn't want to unnecessarily stifle the 9980XE beyond what it already does to itself. So H100i notwithstanding, the rest of these things, pretty disappointing, and we'll walk through the rest of those parts today. As for everything leading up to this final ensemble of disappointment, let's do a rewind of, bad phrasing. Let's look back at what we dealt with. So in January, we learned about Spector and Meltdown, which have proliferated into more variants since then. Spector and Meltdown had such an impact on the industry that Intel's latest 10 nanometer announcements that they disclosed just recently specifically noted in silicon hardware mitigations for those vulnerabilities, showing that there is some dictation of aspects of CPU design based upon this single event of Spector and Meltdown being unveiled. And for Intel, that was a bit earlier than the rest of us. Cryptocurrency mining also blew up big this year. Regardless of your views on mining or cryptocurrencies in general, it remains true for several months that new GPUs were difficult to find, particularly at reasonable prices, and new there meaning not used. We blew the lid open on Final Fantasy XV's benchmark after that, and we saw innumerable flaws in the February launch of the benchmark, including a lack of object culling and LOD scaling for Hairworks elements that heavily affected results. These are things that were being rendered miles away that we confirmed with RenderDoc, Ansel, and other tools. But that soon was outdone by the vacuum ads. We'll just blow past that one. GPP came after that. CTS Labs, their report. You should check that video out that we did if you didn't see it. The GT1030 DDR4 launch, RAM prices going up, and then the silent death of Z490 at Computex. There was also, and that was an AMD part by the way, there was also a 28-core CPU under a chiller, and that doesn't need a reminder. And of course, the launch of RTX. A lot happened this year, and we decided to combine some of those most noteworthy elements into a single PC, which has since vaporized because it exceeded the maximum atomic density of disappointment in one square area. So we're left with these two parts, which is the 9980XE and the 2080, not the TI, specifically with the case having gone back because that whole system is being replaced or refunded, depending. So for the system, the most critical things here to talk about, the RTX 2080, we deemed more disappointing than the 2080 Ti. The 2080 Ti actually, performance-wise, it does its job. It's the new best, so it's always hard to argue against the best because even with the prices, it's still the best. So it's got some high ground there that it can hold. The 2080 though, it launched and it was disappointing, plain and simple. It lacked any significant improvement over the 1080 Ti, and yet the price was almost always higher at launch, and that's changed now that the 1080 Ti is more or less impossible to purchase. But it was one of the bigger letdowns of the year. The CPU is an Intel i9-9980XE, and we chose that because it barely did anything over the existing 7980XE. In fact, it was barely deserving of a review. That's how little changed on this high-end part. So for enthusiasts, the 9980XE is worse than the 7980XE because if you can delid, you can do liquid metal or something like that. It's just better to buy the 7980XE and go that route. As for the case was Walmart's now famous overpowered PC case, the DTW enclosure, which there's a lot of content on that. We did a full review of the case on its own. We'll recap some of that here, but the biggest thing is that it's got a total of 4 millimeters of space, thereabouts, between the front panel and the chassis, thereby choking the entire PC into oblivion. So that was disappointing as well, and we'll talk about each of these elements individually. But let's start with the RTX 2080. It is definitely the most iconic launch of at least the second half, if not the entire year, because there's been nothing. Nvidia's been riding on Pascal for a long time. They've done really well to optimize it, but everyone was waiting for this launch, and we ended up with, well, you know what we ended up with at this point. The RTX 2080 was just a weak launch from Nvidia. That's all there was to it. Even CEO Jensen Huang seemed off in his presentation, struggling to convey why ray tracing is important and often defaulting to simple phrases like, it just works, or it's beautiful, to the extent that there is a compilation on YouTube of him saying,
Everything just works. Everything just works. Everything just works. Everything just works. Computer graphics basically works. And yet for ray tracing, it just works. Everything just works. Global illumination just works. Ambient occlusion just works.
for 10 hours. What Nvidia has accomplished is a massive technical feat for sure, and real-time ray tracing is absolutely an admirable goal. But you really only get one shot with consumers before they write off an entire already existing technology as, quote, BS, as we've seen in some of the comments. That's sort of tragic. With RTX, based on comments alone, a lot of consumers weren't even aware that ray tracing is already a thing. And so now we see regular comments about how, and I'm quoting here, ray tracing is a scam, end quote. Just for reference, We use ray tracing in our own intro animation and outro animation. It's used daily in CGI films, Pixar films, things like that. It's just that the real-time implementation is key, and Nvidia botched it to a point to even tarnish the idea of ray tracing. That's how poorly the RTX launch went over and how poorly their education effort was on informing the audience of what ray tracing is and what the distinction is versus real time. At the Nvidia Editors Day for RTX, it was actually one of the best technical deep dives that we've had from a company. So Nvidia gets huge credit there. The architects, the power design team, the cooler design team, they all did a good job of talking through the product to the editors. That would be people like us. Unfortunately, they also spent a lot of time, several hours in fact, 2 to 3 hours, talking about these games that would support RTX. A huge amount of this presentation was predicated on addressing the obvious concern that Nvidia knew we would all have in the media of, okay, cool, RTX is cool, sure, but what supports it? What is going to support this thing? Because if you have all this tech in here, but on the software side no one does anything, what good is it? Nvidia is not a dumb company. They knew that we would all be pressing that angle. And so to address it preemptively, Nvidia queued up, I don't know how many games, but it was a lot of them, and back to back to back of developers talking about how RTX just works, how it's great to work with, how it's easy to implement, and how their game will have RTX. So don't worry, there will be games that support RTX. And then 50 days went past the launch of the product. So you have 50, 51, 52 days, somewhere around there, before an RTX implementation came to be. That's a problem. All the marketing hype is gone. It's eradicated, and it replaced instead with skepticism from users who are now upset that the product is expensive, is not meaningfully, except for the Ti, not the 2080, not meaningfully outperforming the old products, and the one that does outperform the old products is significantly more expensive. So you have an upset user base and a delayed launch of a key feature that is literally the namesake of the product, RTX. So that set everyone up for disappointment. The first title that did support RTX, as late as it was Battlefield. And it runs barely at 1080p on a 2080 with RTX on and all the other settings pretty high or maxed. Sure, they've issued a lot of changes to that one game, DICE and Nvidia working alongside each other. But it's that first impression that really counts. Nvidia had its biggest misstep in years with one of the most important launches that it could encounter a misstep on. This has been a period where AMD could not respond, making it seem like a no-lose situation. But Nvidia still managed to lose. It took a brand credibility hit that will haunt it at its next major technology unveil. Even if this doesn't impact the bottom line much today, seeing as high-end users still only really have one option and everyone else bought 1080s anyway, and that's still Nvidia, it does impact the skepticism and openness expressed towards Nvidia's future announcements. So this matters. This will have a lasting effect. Everyone was ready for new cards. It should have been a clean sweep for Nvidia, but they just botched every single aspect of the launch, except for, again, that technical side of the Editor's Day was great, but there needs to be more than that. There's a very off presentation by a normally on-point CEO at Nvidia. The presentation alone incited skepticism, largely by doing weird and sort of shady things, but maybe not, well, it was probably intentional, but they did things like comparing RTX effects against just flat shaded objects without any of the standard global illumination or standard lighting effects applied at all. Instead of a comparison against modern graphics tricks, because all computer graphics involves tricking the user into thinking it's good enough, Nvidia compared instead its RTX options versus no effort flat shaded 3D objects with no lighting effects, with no traditional game tricks to make that scene look believable. Or, I mean, you can fake things like caustics. You can fake things like, again, global illumination. But instead of doing that, Nvidia completely changed the lighting and some of their side-by-side comparisons, added in large area lights, new lights on the walls, defeated the purpose of illustrating how global illumination works, and ended up with a demonstration that is basically the equivalent of an infomercial where you have a desaturated photograph of someone who's frowning versus a vibrant photograph of someone who's happy. That's what you're looking at. It is not a fair comparison. And we talked about all of this in our initial review and some post-announcement follow-up materials that you should definitely check out if you haven't. So we'll stop here before repeating everything again. The point is, Nvidia walked away from its announcement looking like it didn't even know how its own technology worked. It looked like it didn't understand what was going on. And you have the CEO up on stage who, at a loss for words, defaults to, it's beautiful, it just works. And the irony, of course, was that you end up then with things like artifacting. But that's all stuff we've talked about. So Nvidia walks away looking bad this time. They're limping a bit. The launch made things look even worse. It knocked some of the wind out of the sails. Nvidia, otherwise an unstoppable juggernaut the last few years, has been knocked down a few pegs now. And the faction standing within the community has taken a hit as a result of this launch. The 9980XE up next was easily among the next most disappointing parts this year. With the 9900K, at least there was real movement in the product stack. Intel did something meaningful and different. The 9980XE, however, added solder and boosted stock frequencies, but that was it. Intel did not make any other changes to the product and ended up making it worse for enthusiasts as a result of soldering it, ironically enough. So for out-of-the-box users, those who never make any changes, it's a bit of an upgrade over the 7980XE, and at the same price, sure, it might be better for those people. The trouble is that the core-to-core thermal delta on the 9980XE was tremendous, as we saw in early benchmarks that we did, and delitting a 7980XE normalized that delta in ways that significantly improve overclocking headroom. With CPU overclocking, and these are advertised strongly as unlocked parts, I'll remind you, with CPU overclocking, you're constrained by the hottest core. And running one core 30 degrees hotter than the coldest set of all the other cores limits headroom significantly. The 9980XE did that, whereas the 7980XE offers an enthusiast an easier product to work with when considering delit options. You just straight shouldn't delit a 9980XE. It's too dangerous. Even ignoring all of this, it was just plain boring. The launch wasn't that exciting. The 9900K launch definitely was it's not like what we're expecting from maybe Sunny Cove in terms of excitement, or Ice Lake, as you may call it, the collection of everything. But the 9900K was still a definitive winner in most performance categories, just about all of them. But it lost in the pricing segment when comparing strictly to the most obvious choice, which would be something like a 2700X or maybe low-end Threadripper. So either way, 9900K, it won some, it lost some, and it advanced the product portfolio for Intel in a meaningful way. That was a good launch, even though it was plagued with just, I mean, when did that even happen? Plagued with things like Principled Technologies, benchmarks, and other controversies, which that was October 9th, by the way. It's on the shirt there. But even that, notwithstanding these controversies around the 9900K, of which there were many that we reported on, the product itself has a place in the market. The 9980XE barely has a place in the market and really shouldn't exist, because ultimately it's a relaunch of the same product from 1 year ago that has solder added to it, and it's a little bit faster stock. So kind of a letdown there. We were hoping for more, but that's the nature of everything being delayed. Hopefully they improve going forward. And then we have Walmart's system. So the DTW series, we don't need to beat this into the ground any further than it already has been. But the point here is to reiterate something that we haven't had enough chance to really talk about, which is that Walmart was in a very key and interesting strategic position to bring PC gaming at hopefully an affordable, competitive price to a market that is otherwise completely oblivious to what PC gaming is. The target audience for the DTW systems, they don't know who we are. They might not know who Linus Tech Tips is. These are people who are probably parents of kids who play Fortnite or PUBG or whose friends do, and they want a gaming PC to do the same. That's the target audience. And keeping that target audience in mind, you have an oblivious customer who is going into a store to hopefully pick up a system to make someone happy. And the system that Walmart came up with through their partners, which would be Esports Arena and making the brand overpowered jointly, as we understand it, the system that Walmart came up with is just bad. The prices have dropped considerably. You're welcome. But it's not a good collection of parts. They're using an H310 motherboard with like a 1080 and 8700 single DIMM per channel memory set up with the H310 motherboard. And I don't know. The power supply was probably the most redeeming part of the build, other than the silicon, which Walmart has no real. I mean, what else are they going to put in there? I guess a Celeron. That would be worse. But the disappointing part about the Walmart system was strictly that it was an opportunity to really reach a wider market, as PC gaming has this incredible advantage of growing right now. PC gaming, it's like a sine wave. You get a bit of a growth in between console cycles, and then you might have a bit of a dip when the new consoles come out. And right now, we're at the peak of that wave of growth. PC gaming is very healthy, especially in the enthusiast space. Games, again, like Fortnite and PUBG, are helping tremendously to grow the PC gaming community, and this helps all of us. It benefits everyone. Rising tide raises all boats, as it may be. So Walmart just totally botched that, is the unfortunate part, because they had an opportunity and they did everything wrong, and it's going to turn people away from PC gaming who otherwise might not have really thought too hard about getting into it to begin with. Sometimes you just want to buy something and use it. You don't need to be an expert on it. So that was a bit of a letdown. And then finally, we had some media examples of disappointment from this year that were in the intro clip, but I will leave those there. You can watch that again if you want to pick up on those. But yeah, that's a disappointment build. So it's been a fun year, though. We've really enjoyed working on everything we worked on this year. This video was, of course, fun and different for us. We'll do another one, but hopefully not until 2020. That's not going to happen. It's going to be 2019. We'll do another one in about a year from now. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, keep an eye out for all of our CES coverage coming up soon. Hopefully we'll have some really interesting and fun stuff to counter all of the disappointing stuff for the year that you can look forward to, and maybe picking up some new products after CES. We'll see if anything's good, though. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up our Disappointment Tour shirt, which I'll just walk you through it briefly. If you didn't notice, there's artifacting everywhere, so that's kind of key. And then we've got the dates and the major disappointing events, and we also have artifacting on the front with some video card silhouettes that we made. So this is, of course, a reference to a bit of everything from the year. Just kind of fun. You can pick it up on store.gamersnexus.net, and we're not going to sell this one forever because it's labeled 2018. But we've got Tri-Blend and Cotton up there. If you're interested in either, pick it up. Thank you for watching, as always. Check out our upcoming content for hopefully some more uplifting stuff, although hopefully you got a laugh from this one. And I'll see you all next time.